We've got a saying on this show, if you've got a quarterback, gosh dang it, you got a chance. And that is the way that modern college football is continuing to trend. So who are those teams that have a chance in 2024? Those quarterback-dependent teams that are going to have a chance to win the whole darn thing, or at the very least make some noise on a national level. We make a whole lot of noise on this show every single day. Every single live show, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we're glad to have you all a part of this, man. Welcome into the Hard Count, the People's College Football Show. It is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. Going to talk about teams that have a quarterback and by logic of having a quarterback now have a chance. That's not it, though. We're also talking about a couple of games that I believe are going to shape the college football playoff picture in 2024. Because remember now, the whole landscape has changed. It went from 4 teams. We said, oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and triple that field. Bada bing, bada boom. We got 12 teams in the playoff. But what are the games during the regular season that are going to give us a good gauge for that picture? We'll talk about that. Quick spoiler, rivalry weekend. We were worried about it. We weren't sure what was going to happen to it. I think we still have a massive amount of importance we got to put onto that weekend. Who's recruiting like a program? Because we talk about it on this show a lot. We talk about, if you have a quarterback, you have a chance. We also talk about if you are into recruiting, then June is the month for you. June, as well as July, is really all about acquiring talent at the high school level. The portals died down. So who's crushing it on the recruiting trail? Texas made a massive move yesterday, landing one of the top quarterbacks in 2026. So we'll give you some thoughts there. In addition to all of that, there's been a lot of buzz around the College Football Hall of Fame, and we've sort of sat on the sideline for the better part of that conversation because, quite frankly, some of that just is a little bit of nonsense to us, just because it's people with votes and some folks, maybe do or don't. All that's to say, right now we have some ridiculous rules in place, and those rules are impacting who is and isn't getting in. And one of those individuals that I believe wholeheartedly will be in the College Football Hall of Fame is Mike Leach. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. College Football 25, we're less than 30 days away. It's a beautiful thing. We got some thoughts on the learning curve that we can expect when it comes to playing that game, because I went back home and had my confidence just absolutely decimated for what to expect from that game, or what to expect, rather, from my abilities when it comes to playing that game. So we'll give you our thoughts there. We have to talk about that, more of a personal story / confession / therapy session. So we'll get to that. But before we do that, I want to talk about the tectonic plates in the college football landscape and how those are shifting right now, because there's been a lot of buzz over the course of the last few weeks around the Big 12, and if we're going to call it the Big 12 and the ACC. And I'm not a realignment guy, but we'll give you a little bit of a conversation piece there as well and our thoughts on that. So if you are tuned in live, one, thank you. We're stoked to have you here. Subscribe to the channel is the first request. The second request is if you're listening on podcasts, and a lot of y'all do, and we appreciate you for that, make sure that you're subscribed to the feed, and also make sure that you are rating and reviewing the podcast. It just helps us do more of what you want to see and helps amplify the platform and get the program to more people that need to see the program. Because we got a lot of folks that are thirsting for college football content and don't know where to find it. So be a friend and pass this along to them, and one way to do that is by rating and reviewing the show. So we got a lot to jump into. I didn't even mention that we're going to talk about Miami and Florida, and that potentially, according to Paul Feinbaum, being the most important game of the college football season. But let's start with the State of series that we've been doing here for the last couple of weeks, and that's essentially just taking an inventory of where things stand in the college football landscape and our take on them. We talked about the state of the college football playoff, talked about the state of recruiting at the high school level, talked about the state of the portal, and all those things are very impactful. But let's zoom out even further and talk about the tectonic plates within college football. Now notice, I did not say conference realignment because, quite frankly, I'm not big on conference realignment. I think, one, it's not about football, so I don't really enjoy talking about it quite as much because we're not really talking about what's going on the field. It's also pretty unreliable information that we're getting on conference realignment, not because people aren't doing a great job reporting on it. We got some of the best minds in the sport that are reporting on this at a media level. With that being said, those rooms, when you talk about realignment, are so small to where the information only gets out that those rooms want to get out. And sometimes that information is a bit of a smokescreen, or maybe they're using us as the college football public as a little bit of a chess piece. So for those reasons, I'm not a fan of talking about it. Also, it just messes with the tradition of the sport. And if you all have watched this show for any period of time, you know that we are very big on tradition when it comes to the college football landscape, and realignment tends to mess with that a little bit. But if you are a fan of Florida State, or you're a fan of Florida, or you're a fan of Iowa, this segment will apply to you, because what's happening right now in college football is not just the realignment tectonic plates are shifting, but I think the plates overall from a competitive landscape are shifting as well as to how your team could be impacted over the course of the next few years. And so what's happening, if you are just kind of parachuting into this whole thing, the Big 12 is looking for some extra cash. And God bless them. I mean, we're all looking for some extra cash. But the headline reads, the Big 12 is exploring private equity groups to create a few more greenbacks for themselves. But the major headline was the Big 12 is open to selling their naming rights. Now, this was great for social media because it allowed people like me to sort of think of ideas. Okay, what are you going to call the Big 12? Allstate was in the mix for the Big 12 naming rights, it sounded like. We'll see where that stands here as things progress. But people were saying, is it going to be the All-State 12, the All-State Conference? Could another company get in the mix? If we're sticking with the label of 12, I could see us doing like the Dunkin' Donuts 12, the Dunkin' Dozen. Like that would kind of fit like a glove if you're asking me, if we're married to keeping that 12 label on there. But what happened as a result of this on the social media side of things was interesting, because you saw the Big 12 trying to do some honest work and then find a way to get some more money for their conference, and folks are dunking on them left and right, saying, poverty conference, that's so lame. They're failing to be as relevant as, you know, the SEC or the Big Ten. But you know who wasn't making fun of the Big 12 in the midst of all of this talk around them finding extra money via naming rights or private equity? Was the Pac-12. Want to know why? Because the Pac-12 is not around to make fun of them anymore. Make fun of anybody for that matter. And God bless the Pac-12. I grew up in Pac-12 country. I grew up watching USC and Oregon, and I grew up going to the Coliseum. I mean, I grew up in that region of the country when I became conscious as a college football fan. I love the Pac-12. But the reality is that today in college football, when Texas and OU left for the SEC, and honestly, even before that, this has become a game of survival when it comes to conference realignment and how your conference exists in the new college football era. And so for the Big 12, thankfully for them, they have someone steering the ship in Brett Yormark, who doesn't have this administration background or this college athletics background. Brett Yormark comes from the entertainment business. Brett Yormark comes from the relevance business. And what relevance is today in modern college football is money. And so Brett Yormark is walking into this thing with a business mindset and is like, all right, I don't love that we're at this juncture where we have to find a way to make some more money and have to find a way to pursue relevance by nature of these different conferences starting to draw backwards and the Big Ten and SEC pulling away. But it is what it is. We got to find a way. It's like when you're on a life raft in the middle of the ocean because the ship is wrecked and there's a bunch of carnage all over the place. Like, you don't love it, but guess what you do? You find a way to adapt and to survive. Whether that's making your own fishing pole, whether that's making another raft with other pieces around, like you find a way, and that's what Brett Yormark is doing here. So as much as folks are dunking on the Big 12 for the naming rights thing and the private equity thing, and talk about, other jerseys now also having some signage on them, and that's potentially a talking point. Make all the fun you want, but just understand now that there is a very large variable of this that is all about survival. And the Big 12 and Brett Yormark are doing their best to adapt and to survive. So that's one piece of this. The other piece of this is you have the ACC that, to me, if you're asking me, I think the ACC is more so a matter of when, not if, they have some major changes over there. Could be tomorrow, could be at the end of the season, could be midseason. I don't know. Could be SEC Media Days. No idea. That feels like maybe a timeline I would watch, though, if we're using history as our teacher. Things tend to break right around this time to Media Days. But it is what it is. The ACC, it's been well publicized, has some major members that are unhappy. Florida State being one of them, Clemson being one of them. If you lose either one of those, I can't imagine they go out on their own. I think Miami would probably end up leaving the ACC if Clemson and or FSU left the ACC. And the reason for that being, for those of y'all, again, parachuting in on this whole discussion, Clemson and Florida State most specifically, has voiced their displeasure with the reality that, hey, listen, we bring home a fair piece of this pie, and we don't take home from a financial perspective nearly as much as we think we deserve to. And they're right. Like, Florida State is the massive brand. They're the massive draw when it comes to folks watching them on TV. And so they're saying, if we're making the pie, shouldn't we take home a larger piece instead of divvying it up evenly with NC State, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Duke, Wake Forest? Like, why are we making the same as them when we're the hot commodity here? And the ACC, I think, has their hands tied a little bit, because the way they could fix this situation would maybe make Florida State happy or Clemson happy, but it would likely make a school like a Wake Forest, a Virginia, and NC State unhappy, because to give someone a bigger piece of the pie, you have to go to somebody else's plate and take their piece of the pie and give it to Florida State. And for that to happen, one of those schools would probably have to sign off on that. So all that's to say, I don't think we're reaching a resolution here anytime soon. Again, I think it's a matter of when, not if. And so that leads us to the next part of this. Like, what happens then when Miami, Florida State, Clemson all look for other conferences? One, they probably would end up at, you would imagine, a Big Ten or SEC. Like, that to me on paper makes the most sense. But then what happens to the ACC? Does the ACC drift towards what the Pac-12 was? Can they adapt and find a way to be more relevant, like what the Big 12 is trying to do right now to stay afloat? Do we just jump into the super conference era where the SEC and the Big Ten take on the Big 12 and the ACC and whatever's left of the Pac-12? Like, there's this massive tidal wave. I was going to say ripple effect here. There's a massive tidal wave that is moving towards college football that is going to change everything as we know it. Now, will that happen gradually? Will it happen all at once? I don't know. But what I am saying is here, as the ACC changes, as the Big 12 struggles to find a way to adapt and survive, that's going to change the sport. That's going to change the format of the sport. Because if we go to a super conference era, if we do go to the SEC Big Ten, and I think that's probably where we're headed, well, then you have the regular season being impacted because you're not playing the conference schedules anymore. So if you're an Iowa fan, are you having a home game against Miami for a conference game? If you're a, fill in the blank here. If you're a Texas fan, are you playing Florida State for a conference game? And if you impact the regular season, we've seen this now, that's going to impact the playoff. You impact the playoff, that impacts, the calendar as a whole in college football. So a lot of things, I believe, are slowly but surely changing. And we'll look up here in 5 years, 10 years, and we'll see a college football that looks, in my opinion, a very, 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 very different version of what we've seen in the past. And it's one of those things where it's like, hey, I'm not a fan of it. I don't think a lot of y'all that watch this show are a fan of it, because what we grew up on is, in a lot of ways, evolving and changing. I don't think it's for the worse just yet. I think that would be a little bit too quick, too knee-jerky to say. But it's changing. And change isn't fun. Change is often met with resistance, and change is something that I'm not a huge fan of, to be honest. But I think that's where we are right now in college football. So I'm not selling you doom and gloom. I'm not telling you things are bad. I think college football is in a great place as long as you have the sickos that watch this sport and the folks that are 100% invested in this sport year-round are dialed in and showing up on Saturdays. But the fabric is slowly but surely changing, and I think, again, that's where we're headed. So the tectonic plates, slow, methodical, gradual, but at some point in time, we're going to look up and say, oh, whoa, this is way different than it was 10 years ago. Now, how different is way different, remains to be seen. But that's kind of the state of the tectonic plates right now in the college football landscape. So we've been doing another segment here, kind of in between segments, and y'all have taken to this in elite fashion, so we appreciate you for that. Random college football player of the day, West Virginia's Noel Devine was that man. You're saying West Virginia in the ACC? No. West Virginia in the Big 12? No. West Virginia in the Big East. West Virginia in the Big East. That was the conference that Noel Devine tore up. 5'8", 180 pounds. He ran for over 4,000 yards in his career in Morgantown. 6 yards a carry. Was a legend his freshman year. Had over 100 yards in the Fiesta Bowl. He, to me, walked so Tavon Austin could run. As Noel Devine got there with Rich Rodriguez. Rich Rodriguez leaves to Michigan. He thinks about going somewhere else. This dude staying at West Virginia, I think, made West Virginia attractive to people like a Tavon Austin. I can't prove that. That's just the way that it feels to me. Also, he was dynamic, like dynamite every single time he touched the football. One of the best highlight tapes, high school and college, I believe, that I've ever seen. So Noel Devine was a stud in the Big East for West Virginia and is our random college football player today. So shout out to Noel Devine. You have to imagine around Christmas time, especially in Morgantown, "Oh Night Divine" maybe has the lyrics changed once in a while. I don't know. I'm just saying. Maybe it's "Oh Noel Divine." I don't know. On this show, we have a saying here: if you have a quarterback, you have got a chance. So with that being said, who are the teams that have a chance to make a lot of noise on a national level because of who they have at quarterback? Now, this is not going to include teams like a Texas or a Georgia or a Oregon. All those schools have phenomenal quarterbacks, but I think some of these teams are a little bit more quarterback dependent, and you look at them very differently by nature of what their quarterback could do in 2024. So starting at the first school I want to talk about here, Tennessee, with Nico Iamaleava, is going to be a force. And to me, Nico being the number one player in the class of 2023, not quarterback, number one player in the class of 2023 for us here at On 3, he is the difference between going 8-4, maybe flirting with 9-3, to being a team that could legitimately win 10-plus football games and be in the college football playoff. Physically, he has all the skills you would ask of a big-time quarterback. He's got the size, got the arm strength, got the accuracy. A thing that stood out to me, though, when we saw him in person out there in Knoxville, his mobility and the way he throws on the run, like that was one of the first things that jumped out to me. He moves so fluid and so smooth, but he flips his hips, rolling left, throwing right, and he delivers that ball on a dime with great velocity, on time. Like, that's going to be a major factor in Tennessee's offense in 2024. Because you saw that a lot in 22 with Hendon Hooker, with him being able to extend plays and them being able to call quarterback design runs. Didn't have that as much with Joe Milton. You'll see that in 2024 with Nico running the show. We've seen what this offense can be when you got the guy at quarterback. I think you got the guy at quarterback in Nico, and I think you got more weapons for him to throw the football to. So go ahead and book it. Tennessee has got a chance as long as Nico is what I believe he very much could be in 2024. Miami. They got a quarterback, and you view them totally differently because of who they got at quarterback. There is no shade I'm going to throw at anybody on Miami's roster or in that quarterback room or who was in that quarterback room, but Cam Ward changes the complexion of what you hope for as a Hurricane fan. Maybe a better way to say that is Cam Ward changes the complexion of what you expect as a Hurricane fan. So I tell you what, it does not take long. You pull up the tape from what he did at Washington State and Cam Ward, like, dude is special. And it's one thing to see that on YouTube and to watch the highlights and all that. It's another to hear everybody in Coral Gables internally echo that sentiment and just say, yeah, he's different. Yeah, he's different. Physically, alpha personality-wise, he's different than what we've had here at Miami under Mario Cristobal. And so I love his ability, yes, but I've said this many times. I love the fit for Cam Ward about as much as I love his ability at Miami. Because Shannon Dawson, we've said it a couple times here, his scheme, to me, fits Cam Ward like a glove. Because, one, they want to attack you horizontally. Does Miami with Shannon Dawson, meaning they want to get the ball in the perimeter, they want to get it out to Restrepo in space and let him cook. Those throws, while on the stat sheet or when you're watching them on TV, they don't look like they're, big-time throws, quote-unquote, because you're only throwing it about a couple of yards in front of the line of scrimmage, if that. But those are really difficult throws because the spot has to be perfect and where you put the football to allow a guy like Restrepo or JoJo Trader or Sam Brown to catch it and then be able to make a play after the catch and get upfield. Like your margin for error is very, very small there. Cam Ward, when I got to watch him, consistently placed the ball in the right spot for his wide receiver. And he also, you look at the stat sheet, like he was 66% completion percentage a season ago in Coral Gables. So he's got the juice there. Massive opportunity for him. Massive opportunity for Miami because, as we've mentioned many times, like the ACC is wide the heck open. Wide the heck open. Florida State, they're going to be tremendous again this upcoming year, but a lot of unknowns on their roster in terms of returning production. We'll see what DJU is. Clemson, I've been pretty vocal. I don't know what they're going to be. I like the young weapons, but I don't know what Cade Klubnik's going to bring to the table. It's wide open. And wide open for Miami, I think, with their quarterback is a good thing. And I think when you look at Cam Ward, he is the reason why you would pick Miami to win the ACC, if that's the way that you're leaning right now. Now, Alabama, to me, is a team that has a chance because of who Jalen Milroe is. And now Alabama, the roster, it's solid, man. Like, do not hear me incorrectly. Nick Saban did not leave the cupboard empty for Kalen DeBoer when he left Tuscaloosa. There are some dudes still on that roster. But you look at the offense, got some good skill players, but you lost your top 3 receiving leaders from a season ago and your top 2 rushers. So there's some production to be made up for. Also defensively, again, a lot of talent, a lot of young bucks as well. They bring back 33% production from that defense from a year ago. And so I mention both those things because with the unknowns and the newness on the defensive side of the ball and with the skill players, you're going to ask more of your quarterback. And to make matters even more emphatic, like Kalen DeBoer runs a quarterback-driven kind of system. They're going to make Jalen Milroe throw the football, I think, more than he did a season ago. They're also, in my opinion, going to play more to his strengths and set him up better as a passer. So he was good last year. He accounted for 35 touchdowns, over 3,000 yards total offense, 66% completion percentage as well for Jalen Milroe. I believe they're going to put more on his plate. And I think if you had a different quarterback stepping into the fold for Kalen DeBoer, with what they lost previously based on the returning production on defense and the lack of players they return at the skill level that I mentioned already, I think you would feel very differently about Alabama than if you had Jalen Milroe playing quarterback for you, as you do, fortunately, if you're a fan in Tuscaloosa. Like, he is the guy that I believe holds Alabama's college football playoff destiny and SEC title destiny in the palm of his hand. I've been very vocal. I think he's a Heisman finalist this year. I think Alabama will be able to thrive in year 1 under Kalen DeBoer because of Jalen Milroe. You got Jalen Milroe, you got a chance. Missouri, another team that we should talk about here a little bit more. Brady Let Him Cook is one of my favorite quarterbacks in all of college football. He threw for over 3,300 yards last year, 21 touchdowns, 6 picks. This season, he will have even less margin for error because they bring back less on defense. They got 58% production back on defense. And you're also going to have a new coordinator on defense. So that side of the ball is, in some ways, not hitting reset, but hitting reacclimate in some ways. And you also lose a 1,600-yard rusher in Cody Schrader. Now, this was a team last year that was 55% run. So they would lean on Cody Schrader, obviously, by nature of his numbers and by nature of how they called that offense. But with that being the case, with what you lose, you're going to ask more of Brady Cook. Now, Luther Burns a dog. There's no mistake in that. But I do think that there's something to be said now for Brady Cook and asking more of him for Missouri to be a team that competes to get to Atlanta, competes for a college football playoff spot, as I think a lot of folks in that fan base are expecting. So you have a chance because of Brady Cook. He's a guy that excites that fan base in for good reason. I'm excited to watch him play. I think he's one of the more slept-on quarterbacks in college football. But because you got Brady Cook at Mizzou, you got a chance. Last one I want to talk about here, let's go out to Big 12 country. KJ Jefferson transferring from Arkansas to UCF. And who's going to be calling plays for him but Gus Malzahn? Now, Gus Malzahn also called plays for a big-body quarterback by the name of Cam Newton when he was at Auburn. And I want people to hear me very clearly. I am not telling you that KJ Jefferson is Cam Newton. What I am telling you is they have a similar skill set in terms of things they do well and the kind of plays you can call for Cam Newton and you called for KJ Jefferson. Quarterback power, read option, design quarterback runs, all of those different nuances that I think blend well with KJ Jefferson's skill set. I think Gus Malzahn is familiar with handling with Cam Newton. Now, there's a lot of talk around Utah and Arizona and Oklahoma State, and, like, for good reason. Kansas State, I mean, for very, very good reason. Like, those are all good teams, and in Vegas should be getting a lot of buzz around who is and isn't betting on them to win the Big 12. But KJ Jefferson now played against tougher competition in the SEC. They don't have Kansas State on the schedule, no Oklahoma State on the schedule. They get Utah and Arizona at home. I think he could be the guy that elevates UCF to Big 12 title contention. Now, he's got to stay healthy. They've got to hit the ground running. But based on his ability, and I think the way this marriage is going to work with Gus Malzahn, if UCF is in that conference title mix, it's because of KJ Jefferson, and I feel confident they will be in that conference title mix because of what he brings to the table. So teams that have a chance because of their quarterback, Tennessee, Miami, Alabama, Missouri, and UCF, you got a quarterback now, you have got yourself a chance. So let me know, too, where we missed. That's not all-encompassing list. There's probably other players that we could talk about there, but those are the ones, to me, that stand out. Appreciate everybody tuned in live, man. Make sure you have subscribed to the channel and liked the video as we keep on rolling here. I want us to talk about the season. Imagine that. The actual season that's about to be played here, because this is the time of year where you get a lot of rankings and you get a lot of hypotheticals, which we take part in on this show as well. I mean, tomorrow's What If Wednesday, and that'll be a lot of fun. But let's look at the actual playoff picture and how it could shape up in 2024. More specifically, which are the games that could create/shape this playoff picture in 2024. I'm not talking about the conference title games. Those will obviously have a big factor in it. But what about the regular season? Because this has been kind of my concern as we move into this 12-team playoff era. How much does the regular season still matter? How much does it still impact the postseason? Is it still as intense? And we've talked about it here. As long as you got college football sickos dialed into the sport, you're in a good place. But I think one of the games that will shape the playoff picture is Clemson at Florida State. The old DJ Uiagalelei Bowl. A long way in establishing the ACC title picture in my mind for a couple of reasons. If you're Florida State, your goal is to get to the weekend after October 5th, so October 12th, unbeaten in ACC play. That is your goal. Because if you do that, you're going to have yourselves a pretty good shot at playing for that title game for the conference. For Clemson, they're going to have an interesting road. They got NC State before they play Florida State. They got Louisville and Virginia Tech as well. They're at Va Tech, rather. This game, to me, is massive because of the tiebreaker implications it could have. We could see a world where Florida State and Clemson finish with similar records in conference, and we go back to this game as the deciding factor as to who gets to play for the conference. Now, Florida State plays Miami after this game. They're at Miami. That's the one that I probably circle the most if I'm Florida State. But if you lose to Clemson and Miami, you definitely don't control your own destiny, and there's a pretty good chance that you're watching the ACC title game from home. Now, when you talk about the college football playoff overall, it doesn't help either of these teams when it comes to their college football playoff odds based on who they have in the non-conference. Clemson plays Georgia, just a nice little grenade to start your season off. Florida State, they play at Notre Dame, and they'll also play Florida. So you don't want to drop any games, obviously, much less a conference game. But if you drop this game, and let's say Clemson loses to Georgia, let's say Florida State loses to Notre Dame, I don't know how a 10-2 ACC non-champion factors into the college football playoff. I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying this is one that is going to be massive in shaping the ACC title race, of course, but also in shaping the at-large and or potential at-large bids for the college football playoff and either of these teams when it comes to their college football playoff aspirations. Let's go to a couple weekends ahead here. October 19th, you got Georgia at Texas. And this is a game that I would classify as a little realignment gift. Like, we're not huge fans of realignment, as you've noticed if you've watched any part of the show so far. But this is one of those games where you look at the new SEC and the new scheduling and you're like, okay, Georgia in Austin, Sark versus Kirby, Ewers versus Beck. Like, all right, and it's a conference game? All right, that's going to be pretty awesome. There is not a clear path for either of these teams when it comes to their college football playoff aspirations. I am assuming that both Texas and Georgia cannot drop more than one game to play for the SEC championship in a divisionless SEC. If we're using history as our teacher, that's probably the way this thing is going to shake out. Texas has Oklahoma the week before in Red River. So you play the Sooners, no break, turn around 7 days later, you got Georgia at the crib. And then they also play Kentucky at A&M after this one. Georgia, they've got Kentucky on the road. They're at Bama. They got Auburn. all before this game, and then they play Florida, at Ole Miss, and Tennessee. So, yeah, there's some work cut out for both of these organizations when it comes to their playoff aspirations, their SEC title aspirations. Again, I think 2 losses makes it a little bit tricky to get into the game in Atlanta. So you can't drop this one, and then you look at what they have in front of them and behind them. Things could get a little bit hairy. I think we could, for the record, see a rematch of this game in Atlanta. Just throwing that out there. We could see this game twice. Heck, we could see it 3 times. We see it in the college football playoff. But I think as much as it sets the tone for the SEC, if one of these teams drops 2 games, I don't know if they make it in. I've said that already. But I think it also sets the optics for the rest of the college football playoff rankings. Like, this is one that I think we could see Georgia and Texas sitting at 1 and 2 heading into this weekend, or heading into the rankings potentially on this weekend. And I think the rankings won't happen until a little bit later in that month. But you could see a lot of those rankings on Twitter and rankings on different platforms saying, hey, if the rankings happen today, and we'll talk about that ourselves on this channel, Georgia and Texas 1 and 2. This, I think, could kind of be that deciding factor for who ends up having pole position in the college football playoff rankings. Now, here's what I'm fired up about. Those games will be fun. They're in October. The concern for us here was always, well, what happens to rivalry weekend? Because that's special, right? Like, you finish up Thanksgiving, you get over with the family, and you're having leftovers, and you're watching on Friday and Saturday the most impactful games from a passion standpoint on your college football team. And there may be no bigger rivalry than Michigan and Ohio State. It was one I was worried about when we did this whole realignment deal with the Big Ten and the expanded college football playoff. But I think, and I truly believe this, I think Michigan and Ohio State will play each other for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Now, if they both go undefeated up into this game, they'll just run it back a week later, and that'll be that. I think Oregon's going to be really freaking good. Like, I think there is a world here, and this is not a prediction, but I think there is a world here where Oregon could run the table and be undefeated and have a spot locked up for the Big Ten championship. It's a hypothetical here, so roll with me. I also think Penn State's going to be real good. I think Penn State probably should be 11-1 when we look at what they are on paper. So the hypothetical I want to throw at you, let's say what happens, and what I just mentioned, Oregon goes undefeated. That would mean that Ohio State and Michigan both have at least 1 loss in conference play. So let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, Ohio State's 10-1, Michigan coming to town, they're 10-1. This game is for a spot in Indy. Now, Penn State, they're also 11-1 or 10-1, whatever you want to say. If Ohio State wins, they're in because they have the tiebreaker over Penn State. And if Michigan wins, I believe the tiebreaker would also work out to where they would get in over Penn State. So think about the stakes here. If Ohio State beats Michigan, and they're both at 10-1, Michigan falls to 10-2. Ohio State goes up to 11-1. They get to play for the Big Ten title, kind of exercise some of those demons from previous. Phenomenal for Ohio State in the sense that what they do for themselves from a college football playoff and Big Ten title hopes. But think about what that does to Michigan. Michigan falls to 10-2, and I think you're probably still in the college football playoff at 10-2 if you're Michigan. But what if they're 9-2? What if they lose to Texas week 2, and they walk into Columbus trying to fight for their college football playoff lives? And Ohio State, after all the jokes they've had their way from Ryan Day and going 0-3 the last 3 tries and everything that they've said about Michigan and this, that, and the other, and they knock Michigan out of college football playoff contention and put them at 9-3, that's all you need. That supercharges this matchup in every way, shape, or form. The other discussion could be if Michigan walks in there, beats them for the 4th year in a row, I think the vibe in Columbus would be uncomfortable, to say the least, if you're Ryan Day. But Michigan then would propel themselves into the Big Ten championship game and would knock Ohio State out of the Big Ten championship game in a year where it was supposed to be their year. This is supposed to be the roster for Ohio State to go do it. It's supposed to be the squad. You went and got Caleb Downs. You brought everybody back on defense. You got Will Howard. You got Quinshon Judkins. And you don't make the Big Ten title game in a year where Michigan really, on paper, should be down with a new head coach, new quarterback, 128th in returning production out of 134 teams. This, to me, will still have a ton of juice, and I think will very likely, in my mind, I think this will be for a Big Ten championship spot. Not a Big Ten championship necessarily, but a Big Ten spot. and it'll be a lot of fun to watch. So those are a couple of the college football playoff shaping games. That's one on rivalry weekend. One more rivalry weekend I want us to talk about here. This is not for a conference championship. Notre Dame at USC. Obviously, Notre Dame's not in the conference. I don't think USC is going to be in contention for a Big Ten championship. But even with that being said, 10-2, I think, gets you in from the Big Ten, as I've mentioned before. Let's say Notre Dame runs the table, or let me rephrase this. Notre Dame, I think, at 10-2 would feel confident, but at 11-1, you feel much safer. Like 10-2, I think, as an independent school, without having that extra data point on conference championship weekend, could be a little dicey for the Irish. But Notre Dame, man, they've got a very workable schedule. Like, at A&M and Florida State are the toughest games on the schedule. If they go into the game against USC at 11-0 and they run the table, maybe this is a different discussion. But let's say that they split those. Let's say they split at A&M and Florida State, and they go into this game at 10-1. Or let's say they go 0-2 in that stretch. They go into this game at 9-2. This is a playoff kind of game for Notre Dame. This is a chance. I mean, if they want to have a chance to even get into the dance, they got to win this game. And then USC, their schedule isn't easy by any stretch. They got LSU to start the year. They're at Michigan. They got Penn State. Those are the big ones you're looking at, and in addition to some other tough games in the Big Ten. But if they go 1-2 in those three, and they roll into this game at 9-2, the most cinematic kind of game we could get as college football fans is a 9-2 USC and a 9-2 Notre Dame. That, in my mind, would very much so be for a playoff spot for USC, as I've mentioned, and it really could be for a playoff spot for Notre Dame. And for USC, if they were to find their way into the college football playoff their first year in the Big Ten, and they did it by beating their rival Notre Dame, that'd be sweet for Lincoln Riley. That'd be sweet for Lincoln Riley. It'd be validation for everyone in LA that's been saying, man, if we could just get a defense. And then wouldn't you know it, bada bing, bada boom, you plug in a new defensive staff with D'Anton Lynn, you get it done, and you find your way in the college football playoff in a line of scrimmage league. That'd be, I mean, incredible if you're a USC fan. But if you're Notre Dame and you miss the playoff, I mean, this is a team that is built for a year like this. You went out and got Riley Leonard. You went out and got some weapons via the portal to make a run like you hope to make this upcoming season. And so they expect to be a playoff team. So beating USC to get in, I mean, chef's kiss if you're an Irish fan. But if you fall short in a game like this, that would hurt. That would hurt, to say the least. So Notre Dame and USC will have some juice. Rivalry weekend overall should still have some juice. Other games receiving votes that'll shape the college football playoff. I'll go rapid fire here. Bama at Tennessee, a little third Saturday action. Tennessee getting in the college football playoff, to me, feels like it would require a signature kind of win like they had in 22, where they threw those goalposts in the river. Turns out they don't float. For Alabama, if they can't beat a year-one quarterback as talented as I think Nico is going to be, how many other losses do they have is my question. Yeah, if you beat Tennessee, good times are rolling, but you still got Mizzou, you're at LSU, you're at Oklahoma. There's some other games on the schedule there where if you're losing to Tennessee, is that the end of the losing? I don't know. So that'll be an impactful one. Week 2, we alluded to it as well. Texas at Michigan. A loss for either of those to me isn't fatal, but you do lose your mulligan. And Michigan, we already mentioned, they got Oregon on the schedule. They got Ohio State on the schedule. Texas has got to play Georgia. Like, it doesn't get any easier for either side of that thing. So that's a big one in week 2. And then the Big 12 is going to be wild this year. Like, the Big 12 is going to be something else, brother. Like, you add in Utah, you add in Arizona, Colorado. Like, there's going to be a lot of new faces in that conference, and we're still getting used to the other new faces that just joined that conference in UCF and Cincinnati. It's going to be really early in the year, but Utah and Arizona, when Arizona goes to Salt Lake City, Utah will have Oklahoma State before and then right into this game, so that's going to be a little bit of a tough turnaround. And then also before this game, Arizona is at Kansas State. Now, Arizona and Kansas State, oddly enough, will not impact the Big 12 standings. But I do think if you're talking about the college football playoff, I don't know that a 10-2 Big 12 team will make the playoff. I think it's very possible that you will have to win the conference to be in the playoff from the Big 12. So all that's to say, 2 losses for a Utah or Arizona in September If you end up leaving that month with 2 losses, it could be the kiss of death for your college football playoff hopes. But regardless, that's why they play the games. But, you go online, you look at the schedules, you look at what we got ahead of us here. It's going to be an incredible season. It really is. It always is. But when you look at these games, you start to break them down even more intricately and get a little bit more in depth there. Because the juice is flowing a little bit, man. Because the juice is flowing, it makes you want to get fired up at 11 a.m. Eastern on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Or really any day that you get to wake up and talk college football. But for us, that's the most impactful games when it comes to the college football playoff and what it could look like this upcoming season. Now, speaking of impactful games, we didn't mention this one, but it probably could be thrown in there. I don't know that we talk about it as a college football playoff impact game just yet because it's so early in the year. But Paul Feinbaum came out and said that he believes Miami at Florida in week 1 is the most important game of the season. Now, Paul Feinbaum is one of the GOATs, if not the GOAT, in this whole space. How do we feel about what he had to say? And what points does he have here as to why this could be the most important game of the season? Because I do think if you're looking at Miami and Florida, you could make a very realistic case that if it's not the most important game of the season for all of college football, it might be the most important game of the season for both these teams. Before we get to that, though, if you're a college football junkie, make sure you are subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. If you're watching this as a one-off clip, no sweat, but we do this in an hour-long live show that we have on this channel from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So make sure you're dialed in. Also follow me on the social channels if you just want to make sure you don't miss a minute of what we got going on in the show. I'll tweet out when we're going live, and that's another great way to make sure you're informed on all things this show. The implications of this game are massive. I mean, for both coaches now going into year 3, it's got a show-me kind of vibe. This is a show-me year for both head coaches. For Miami, this is supposed to be your pop year. First year, go 5-7. Don't love it, but it was year 1, so you get kind of a pass for that. The next year, you go 7-5. Okay, that's progress. Really should have gone 8-4. Didn't take a knee. It is what it is. But you got a roster who reflects that it is year 3 in Coral Gables. You got a quarterback who's a game changer, as we've mentioned already. And you look back at this trend of 5-7 to 7-5. Okay, well, then how much of a jump are we making in year 3 from year 2? This is a show-me year for the good folks in Coral Gables. Same thing is true for Florida. Because this is now, if you're Billy Napier, I think you can say with a lot more confidence, this is your team. Couldn't say that when you arrived, and that's been, I think, pretty well documented. Florida did not walk into a furnished apartment. Like, this boat had a few holes in it when you walked in. From a roster perspective, from a culture perspective, you had to do a little bit of work to get this thing back to neutral. I think they are back to neutral if you're Florida. Now, the schedule is brutal, but this is a game that can do a lot for you when it comes to the approval rating. Because this game, I think, is amplified in terms of impact and stakes because it's a rivalry game. Like, if Florida was opening with Kentucky, it'd be big because it's Billy Napier's year 3, and what I just said about a show-me year is still true. But because it's Miami, rivalry impact, there's some pride involved here. It means a little more for the folks in Gainesville. Same thing for Miami. If you open with NC State, big game, fun matchup, doesn't have nearly the same juice. It's also huge for recruiting optics for either side. Like, rivalry bragging rights are huge, but if you are going to have success at Miami or have success at Florida, you have to recruit the state well. And I've said this many times, but I think one of the keys to recruiting the state well is being able to make the pitch to high school kids, hey, you come play here, you're going to beat the other schools that are currently recruiting you. Florida clearly being in the mix for a lot of these kids in state that Miami's also going after. So whatever happens in this game, man, like, there's going to be an overreaction externally. We know that. Florida loses. People are saying, fire Billy Napier right now. He's not the guy. If Mario Cristobal loses, they're saying, it's year 3 and you can't beat Billy Napier and all the things that Florida's had going on in the offseason. Like, the optics are going to sway very quickly because we get one data point from week 1. So there's going to be an overreaction on the outside. Now, what I'm more curious about, and the reason why I think there's more impact on this game, and why I think Paul Feinbaum's got a point here, there will be an overreaction on the outside. What about on the inside? What happens internally in this game? Because if you win this game for either side of this, there's belief, there's confidence, there's swag. Like, if you're Miami and you go into the swamp and you beat this team, forget what people are saying about Florida. You're saying we went into that environment and we found a way to get a dub. Where else are we going that we can't win? What's the more difficult road atmosphere we're playing in? I don't see one. Cam Ward's first season as a starting quarterback for us here in Coral Gables. He's only going to get better. That was just the jumping off point. The confidence would really, I think, start to gain some momentum and start to build. And if you're Florida, it validates everything that you thought about yourself in the offseason. Because they are, I think, insulating themselves very well right now in Gainesville. They've heard all the talk. They see all the things on social media. But if you beat Miami in game one, it's okay, we are who we thought we were. Okay, we are exactly what we believed we were during this offseason. Because Miami, they're going to be ranked, I believe, in the top 25, if not higher, to start the season. You beat them game one, validates a lot of what you believe. Now, a loss, I think, has the potential for both sides to really create a bit of, I don't know if a tailspin's the right word, because I don't think it's quite that dramatic, but I do think you lose some confidence. Because everything that either side of this has worked towards this offseason starts with this game. Like whatever they think they're building out there in Coral Gables or in Gainesville, this is the first brick that you're trying to lay in year 3 for either side of that. So if you can't lay that first brick down, start to look at the rest of the instruction, you're saying, whoa, wait a second. That was supposed to be step 1, and we failed on step 1. Well, how do we do step 2, 3, and 4? Maybe we're extrapolating too much from this, but I think that's probably the general tempo or general tone that would be set on either side, the hesitation at least on either side, if you were to drop game 1. Now, I think that a win or a loss will have staying power for either side of this. But I think if you're Miami, you lose this game, let's just say that happens, you can still run the table the rest of the way. Schedule's pretty workable. You go 10-2, 11-1. 11-1, you're probably in the ACC title game. Not probably. You are in the ACC title game and you're in the college football playoff. 10-2, you have a chance to be in the college football playoff because I think that would put you in the ACC championship game. So if you win that, you're in. Miami can be okay if they drop this game. But you build in the excuse of, okay, well, it was on the road, tough environment, a lot of transfers, like we'll see where we are in a few weeks when we really get this thing solidified. If you're Florida, this could be the game where if you're 7-5 and you're Billy Napier and you beat Miami, maybe this is the lean that gets a couple of votes from people to keep Billy Napier around a little bit longer. But if you get blown out by Miami at home, you go 7-5, people are going back to this rivalry game and saying, yeah, I didn't like the way that looked. That left a bad taste in my mouth, and you're starting from the negative. So I'm not predicting Billy Napier's future at Florida. I'm just saying this is one that you would really like to have in a way where it looks good for either side, but especially for Florida. So is it the most important game of the season? Who's to say? But I think for either side of this, you could sell me on the idea of this being the most important game for the folks at Miami and at Florida. And right now it's the most important game because for both sides of it, it's the next one. And that's always the most important one. So that's going to be fun, man. A lot of ripple effects will be felt from that game. I'll tell you right now. So if you are tuned in live to the show, or if you're a college football sicko, period, you're listening on podcasts, we appreciate y'all. But if you're a sicko, the great part about the college football calendar is even after they stop playing games, recruiting never really seems to stop. And June is for recruiting, make no mistake about it. So with that being said, who is recruiting like a program, as we say on this show? Not saying program, program. If you're recruiting like a program, you are on fire on the trail. And who's more on fire? Who's done a better job on the trail in 2025 than Ohio State? They got 16 commits in the class of 2025. They got 3 5-stars. They have the best corner combo in 25 between Naeem Offord, number 1 corner, and number 3 corner in the class currently. Devin Sanchez, the other corner as well. 4 commitments this month. So they're not slowing down anytime soon in Columbus. Almost a third of their guys they have committed in this class are from Columbus, or not from Columbus, excuse me, are from Ohio, so probably not that far from Columbus. The reason why that's important to me is because I think with this game against Michigan that defines you at Ohio State, I think growing up around it, I think knowing what it's about, I think being able to see as you grow up and have that being a consistent part of your life, I think that matters when you get out on the field and not walking into it knowing it's a big rivalry but not really knowing what it's about. I think that helps, quite frankly, for Ryan Day and company. Nothing really that new here for Ohio State. They've recruited well previously. They're going to keep recruiting well. Can't go broke getting paid. Cannot go broke getting paid, and Ohio State on the recruiting trail is doing the equivalent of getting paid from where I'm standing in terms of the top talent they're acquiring. Now, Texas, they're on the outside looking in with the top 10 right now. They got a commitment from Caleb Chester this month, one of the high-profile recruits for them for this new class, but they're going to start to make some more moves, I believe, here as we get into the season and start pushing closer to signing day. They're in a good spot right now for the top receiver in America, DeCorian Moore. The RPM is leaning heavy towards Texas. That'd be massive for Steve Sarkisian. The reason why I have him on this list, though, is just yesterday, they landed one of the top quarterbacks, not in 25, but in the class of 2026. Now, if that last name sounds familiar, former Phoenix Sun, Raja Bell, this is his kid. Feel old yet? I do. Here's my thing, man. Like, if you have a quarterback, you have a chance, and we've established many times on this show. So having the quarterback, as we move into the future of college football and the expanded playoff, that position is only going to become more and more important to have a guy who can make a difference for you in a expanded playoff game where you're on the road in a playoff game and you're in a hostile environment, or you're playing in a situation where you have to ask your quarterback to go make a play for you on 4th and 2 to get you to the next round. Like, the importance of the quarterback position is only going to grow. And here's my thing with Texas that would encourage me if I'm a fan. Chefs in Rome, they specialize in pizza, right? Eskimos in Alaska specialize in ice. Steve Sarkisian specializes in quarterbacks. Look at his resume. Look at who he's worked with. Landing his guy for the future in Diabell is massive for Texas. Again, I think they're going to continue to press on and probably move up those rankings as we get further and further into this recruiting cycle in 25. Now, Michigan, sitting at number 13. But they've made some moves this month. They've gotten 3 commitments of their 8 in the month of June. Sharon Moore now, as the new head coach out there in Ann Arbor, the thing with him is he recruits. He recruits, man. Like, say what you want about old Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. They would be a little bit more developmental leaning than being able to be that school on signing day that was like somewhere in the top 10. Not that they didn't have top 10 classes, but that wasn't really their MO. Sharon Moore, one of the things we heard about him when he took this job was, hey, he's going to lean on the talent acquisition side of things for Michigan. He's going to make that a priority. So, Sharon Moore making moves. We'll see where they're on signing day. But what if Sharon Moore and the recruiting juice he has right now, you can then pair with the apparatus where you develop players at Michigan, like Jim Harbaugh did, which will be a task. Don't get it twisted. It'll be a big ask. If they do that, who's stopping Michigan? If they get top talent and develop top talent, that's what Georgia's done. That's why Georgia's winning national championships. So Michigan, it's still early on. Made some moves this month. They're recruiting like a program, but keep an eye on Michigan and where they land here as we get further and further into this cycle. Now, Auburn's at number 8 right now at the time of us being live in the 2025 On3 industry team recruiting rankings. 4 commitments in June right now, so they're cooking. I think they're in striking distance from where they would like to be. I believe being a top 5 class is what I think Hugh Freeze would like to accomplish. Landed a top 10 class with 6 wins. If they put proof of concept on the field, I think that's the last missing ingredient to really cause Auburn to explode and be a national title contender in the future. I really believe that because they have everything else. Got a fun scheme to play in offensively. You got a coach with a proven track record. You have a great brand in the SEC. You got great resources and a staff and administration all pulling in the same direction. If you just put winning into that, what else do you need? I mean, what else are you looking for if you're a top recruit in America to go and play in front of or to go play in? Julian Lewis, big-time quarterback in the class of 2025, 5-star cat, currently committed to USC, was most recently on a visit to Auburn this past weekend. We'll see where things stand there as we get closer and closer to signing day. Auburn feels good about where they stand with him, but again, he's committed to USC. It's not over till it's over, but he's committed to USC, but I'll just say that recruitment rather is still ongoing, and from what it sounds like, they feel good about how that visit went. Georgia, death taxes in Georgia having a top 3 class on signing day. Nothing massive here. I mean, they're currently the number 3 class right now in the class of 2025, or in the 2025 rankings, rather. 4 commitments in the month of June alone. They have 9 commitments in the state of Georgia. Now, that sounds like an obvious statement because they are the team in the state and they should be able to lock down the state. But if you lock down the state of Georgia, I think that's one of the most underrated talents, or underrated states, rather, when it comes to high school talent, because they don't get the same buzz maybe as the big schools in California do, or the branding of Texas or Florida. Like 23 players in last year's draft got drafted that played high school football in the state of Georgia. That was 3rd most in the U.S. So there's talent in the state, and if you lock it down, you're going to have great results on the field. Kirby Smart, doing what Kirby Smart does, recruiting at a high level. 2 more schools to touch on here really quickly. Alabama, recruiting like a program, 6 commitments in the month of June. They have had 5 commitments since flipping Keelan Russell from SMU. Now, if you're just parachuting into this, Keelan Russell, one of the top quarterbacks in this cycle, was committed to SMU. Kalen DeBoer gets the spatula out, flips him to Alabama. Other players are seeing that. If you're looking at, the trend of this whole thing, you're like, okay, people probably want to play with Keelan Russell. That probably helps the recruiting efforts. They got 2 of those commitments of the last 5 on the offensive line. So trenches football is an emphasis here in Tuscaloosa, as we can tell. Kalen DeBoer now, he is doing what I wasn't sure he'd be able to do. And I don't know that we have the book out on him just yet as a recruiter, but if you're looking at the early returns, he is recruiting at a high level. That's why Alabama has been Alabama. Yes, because Nick Saban is the GOAT and because of the processes they had in place, of course. But Alabama won at a high level for a long time, in large part because of the talent they had on that roster, in large part because of how they recruited. So if Kalen DeBoer can keep trending this direction and push Alabama into the top 5, they're at number 6 right now, I believe, in the On3 industry team recruiting rankings. That would be massive, and I think that would be enough juice in the recruiting trail to keep those expectations where they are in Tuscaloosa in terms of competing for national title kind of hardware. Wisconsin. Talk about Wisconsin enough on this show, man. Wisconsin is a top 20 class right now in 2025. They have got 8 commitments so far in the month of June, most recently landing Eugene Hilton, wide receiver. That name sounds familiar because T.Y. Hilton's his dad. Luke Fickell develops, man. Like, say what you want about the guys he did or didn't recruit at Cincinnati. When they got on campus there, but by the time they left campus there, they were better football players. And went and got NFL draft picks from Cincinnati, a G5 school at that point in time. Luke Fickell's going to develop. So with him having a top 20 class, I'm just saying I think that's all he needs. Do you want to be top 15, top 10? Sure. But you give them a top 20 class, they're going to find ways to compete with the big boys. I think they are going to be a similar blueprint to what Michigan was in terms of we'll take good talent and we'll develop and make them great players. I think that's what Wisconsin wants to do. Worth noting, too, Wisconsin in this class currently has 3 wide receivers and 1 tight end committed. When was the last time we were talking about Wisconsin being elite at developing, or rather acquiring pass catchers? That Phil Longo effect, the air raid offense now at Wisconsin, it's no longer 3-4 tight ends out there. It is like, hey, we're going to throw the ball around now. So if you want to catch the football, come play at Wisconsin. So that's a lot of schools there: Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Wisconsin. In my eyes, it's still early now. All of those schools recruiting like a program. We'll see how they trend as we get closer and closer to National Signing Day. Telling you, man, don't sleep on the recruiting rankings. This is that time of year where you can look behind the curtain and see what your team is doing in terms of building for future years. The lifeblood of college football. The portal is still massive. Do not get it twisted. The portal is still a very big part of this. But if you want to have sustained success, you recruit at the high school level, you build a strong foundation, you use the portal to kind of fill in some holes, maybe correct some mistakes on your roster. Now, speaking of mistakes, man, the College Football Hall of Fame, I love the College Football Hall of Fame. As a museum, whenever I'm back in Atlanta, like I will make it a point to get to that building. 1, because they do a great job with the museum itself. 2, it's just a cool experience as a fan to go in and see the hype video and see the exhibits and see the trophies. Like, I love the College Football Hall of Fame. But they are absolutely swinging and whiffing on this whole Mike Leach situation. So Mike Leach, rest in peace, is not eligible for the Hall of Fame. But I'm telling you right now, he will be in the College Football Hall of Fame. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, there is currently a rule to be eligible for the Hall of Fame as a head coach. Your career winning percentage has to be at 60%. Now, Mike Leach took over some situations that weren't necessarily ready-made to win, but even with that being the case, he flipped them around and has a career winning percentage of 59.6%. He is one win away from being at 60%. And the Hall of Fame is saying, nope, sorry, can't do that. Can't let you in, Mike. What are we doing here? Again, I'm telling you, even though this is the way it looks right now, Mike Leach will be in the College Football Hall of Fame. And the first reason being, it makes zero sense to begin with. Like, I looked high and low to find a explicit mission statement from the Hall of Fame and the National Football Foundation. You saw a lot of different things, but the overarching sentiment was this exists, this being the Hall of Fame, to honor the greatest the game has seen. To honor the people that have helped shape this sport. Y'all, Mike Leach is one of the founding fathers of the air raid offense. You turn on a game any other Saturday, you will see the air raid offense or a version of the air raid offense being played. Like right now, it's the pace and space, spread up tempo, make you defend the entire field, make you defend, every sideline to sideline rather, that Mississippi State's going to run, that Oklahoma has run with Jeff Lebby in the past, that Josh Heupel's running. Like, this is something that's prevalent to college football. So in terms of impact and someone that's left their mark on the sport, Mike Leach is one of the greatest and checks that box with flying colors. Another thing why I believe this is going to be a matter of when, not if, Mike Leach becomes a Hall of Famer. Let's not act like these rules around the Hall of Fame are somehow written on stone tablets coming down from Mount Sinai. Like, we change rules when they don't make sense. When the circumstances present themselves that maybe give us a better reason or a better path forward than the rules would allow for, we adapt. We evolve. It's what society has always done. Like, NIL is a great example. There was a point in time where players are sitting there and saying, listen, like, they're worth a lot more than whatever they're being given on a scholarship. Common sense prevailed there. NIL is now a reality. 20 years ago, they would have taken away in handcuffs. Like, what are we doing here? Throughout history, we've changed. This is another situation where common sense is going to prevail, and we're going to change. We're going to change the Hall of Fame rules, or something's going to change here that's going to allow Mike Leach to be in the Hall of Fame because it's common sense. And the big reason for this, too, I think this is probably the most convincing case I could make for why Mike Leach will be in the Hall of Fame. Remember Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back? Why did that happen? Yes, because NIL became a reality and it became too obvious, too blatant of a common sense issue. But the big catalyst was Johnny Manziel speaking out and saying, hey, Heisman, appreciate y'all, but I'm going to go hang out at home. We're not going to be at the Heisman Trophy ceremony until you give Reggie Bush his Heisman back, and being vocal about that. Tell you what, too, Johnny Manziel would not have been the last one to do that. He would have been joined by, I believe, a handful of others, and it would have started to gain some momentum, and then the Heisman looks bad. Same thing is sort of starting to happen around this whole conversation with Mike Leach in the Hall of Fame. Like, Lincoln Riley's going on Twitter and saying it's ridiculous he's not in the Hall of Fame. Bob Stutz on Twitter saying he should be in the Hall of Fame. So people with influence, not just people like me behind a microphone, people that are actually head coaches in the sport and will be up for the Hall of Fame or in the Hall of Fame, are starting to say, hey, this is ridiculous, this makes no sense. That's embarrassing for the Hall of Fame. I promise you, man, I don't care what age you are or how macho you believe you are, you don't grow out of being embarrassed. And the Hall of Fame right now is being embarrassed. And so to save some face here, I think it's a matter of time before they pivot and they say, you know what, hand up, we were wrong, which we always appreciate when people do that. We were wrong. Mike Leach, you're in the Hoff. That's going to happen. That is going to happen. So, again, if the point is to honor the greatest, if the point is to try and remember the greatest that has ever been a part of the sport, Mike Leach checks that box, and I think this is one of the many benefits of the social media era in college football. It has a lot of drawbacks for sure, but the fact that everyone can have a voice, especially those with major influence like college football head coaches or previous head coaches can have a voice, make their 2 cents known, The mob mentality here, I think, is going to help get Mike Leach in the Hall of Fame. And I'm all about it. I am all here for it. All right, hey, everybody, make sure you are subscribed to the channel here. I want us to get vulnerable here for a minute. Because College Football 25 is less than 30 days away from being released. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait. I got to buy a system, just full transparency, but we're not far from that. And so I went home this past weekend to Atlanta. Little brother just graduated college. He's into Madden. And to give you some backstory here, he and I used to have epic battles in NCAA 14. And I'm going to toot my own horn here. I was the man at NCAA 14. Like 4 verticals, I was unstoppable. I would just dice up your defense. There was nothing you could run that would stop me. All right, I'm running trail shake, which is a cheat code in that game. I'm running read option. I'm running the triple option. Like, I am making you submit to my will by my offensive prowess on the sticks in NCAA 14. So I get back home. Brother's got a PS5. Brother's playing Madden. I'm like, oh, heck yeah, let's get after it. Again, thinking I'm the man because I haven't played since the PS3 where we had NCAA 14. And so I get on the sticks, and y'all, I am atrocious. I am awful. Like I am so bad playing Madden on PS5 from what I was playing NCAA 14 on the PS3. Confidence decimated. So immediately my thought goes to the game that matters, and I'm like, is this what I'm going to be in College Football 25? Like, am I washed up from my NCAA 14 days? Is it a matter of me just not playing the game? Like, do I have to get back into this? The good news is, I think, twofold. One, there will be a learning curve for all of us. The reason why there will be a learning curve for all of us is the second reason why there's good news here. Andy Staples actually got to play this game out there in Orlando. And Andy Staples also has a show here on the On3 YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed there as well to be dialed into all things college football and College Football 25. He made a very convincing and reassuring case that College Football 25 is not just going to be a Madden clone. It's going to be different games. So hearing that, kind of exhale. All right, I don't like being embarrassed in Madden, but even so, like, okay, I have some runway here to work with, and I can maybe kind of salvage my poor performance in Madden when this game comes back out. The gameplay sounds like it's much different than Madden, which was encouraging. The read option and the RPO game and the triple option game, it sounds like, is very much so emphasized in the new College Football 25, whereas in Madden it's not really. The big thing, too, which I think is encouraging, is the gameplay where you kind of have a roster disparity from what different teams look like and different players look like from a skill level is reflected in the game as it is in college football. What I mean by that is we love college football in a lot of ways because you can have a first-round pick line up against a walk-on. And the talent level is drastically different there. We all know that. In the NFL, first-round pick versus third-round pick, yeah, there might be some talent differences, but how much is that really going to impact the game? In Madden, it shouldn't impact the game. In College Football 25, it's going to impact the game. So that kind of leads into this whole, I guess, point I want to make here. We have some time to get our sea legs if we haven't played games in a long time, haven't played video games in a long time, as yours truly hadn't. And college football is going to be very different than professional football in a video game standpoint because that's what it is in real life. And college football is not the NFL, and that's why we love it. And that's what this game reflects. The tradition, the pageantry, the feel, home field advantage, all those things, it sounds like is reflected in this game. So if there's a learning curve for you, like there was for me, we're going to be okay. This game that we're getting in College Football 25, very different than Madden. So take a deep breath, inhale, exhale. Don't get discouraged, all right? Even if you have a little bit of time getting back to video games, that's going to maybe have a little bit of, again, a kind of a, what's the right word? Learning curve I keep going back to. Reacclimation period to getting back into video games. We're going to be okay. Don't stress it. Just keep fighting the good fight and understand, though, that we're kind of all starting in some way with the even playing field. So less than 30 days away. Quick disclaimer, too, we're going to do a lot of college football content. College Football 25 content on this platform. I'm talking highest rated players in the game, or so we think, rivalries we can't wait to play. We're going to do a lot of College Football 25 content, so make sure you're subscribed here, and we'll have a good time doing so. Usually we do a live chat with y'all, but y'all, we went long today. long today. In the month of June. In the month of June, we're filling over an hour of college football content, and that's just a beautiful thing. So we appreciate y'all being dialed in. We appreciate y'all being subscribed to the channel, rating and reviewing the podcast, all that good stuff, man. We are back on the air tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. It is What If Wednesday. So I'm going to retweet it over on my Twitter page. What is your biggest what if that will shape the 2024 college football season? Nick Brake producing the whole show and y'all making it go. I'm JD Pickell. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We are going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.